Welcome back to our channel. In the previous episode, we dove into Europe in 1,200 years before Christ, an era of dramatic collapses, invasions by the Sea Peoples, and the abrupt end of empires such as the Mycenaean and the Hittite. If you haven't watched that epic episode yet, go check it out and then come right back here. But now, we're fast-forwarding 200 years to 1,000 years before Christ. The continent is rising from the ashes of the late Bronze Age collapse, with iron emerging as a revolutionary technology that makes weapons and tools more accessible, without relying as heavily on distant trade routes. Migrations continue, cultures adapt to drier climates, and Phoenician trade expands, connecting the Mediterranean in unprecedented ways. Using this fascinating map you can see on screen, we're going to explore every corner of Europe, highlighting peoples, habits, beliefs, and the transformations of these turbulent 200 years. Let's start in Western Europe, where bronze still persists, but iron is beginning to infiltrate, bringing innovations in warfare and agriculture. In the southwest, the Iberians dominate much of the Iberian Peninsula, evolving from the Proto-Iberian societies we saw in 1,200 years before Christ. Now, their daily life revolves around copper and silver mining, essential for trade, combined with intensive agriculture of wheat, olives, and vineyards. Picture entire communities working the fields at dawn, with flocks of sheep grazing on the hillsides. They are a hierarchical people, with warrior chiefs, who display their prowess in battle with long swords, now experimenting with iron imported from the Phoenicians. Their customs include communal feasts, with flute music and circular dances that strengthen tribal bonds. In their beliefs, they venerate fertility goddesses and earth spirits, performing rituals in sacred caves with offerings of jewelry and sacrificed animals. Some tombs reveal burials with personal goods, suggesting a view of the afterlife as a continuation of earthly existence. Over the last 200 years, contact with the Phoenicians has intensified, with colonies like Gades, Cadiz, flourishing and bringing not only metals, but also ideas, such as alphabetic writing, which begins to influence local records, making their society more connected to the Mediterranean world and less isolated. North of the Iberians, in the Pyrenees and adjacent regions, the Basques, or Vascones, preserve their unique identity, resisting outside influences like few others. Different from the surrounding Indo-Europeans, they maintain an isolate language, possibly a legacy of prehistoric peoples dating back millennia. They live in family clans in rugged mountains, building sturdy stone dwellings resistant to the harsh climate, where sheep and goat herding forms the heart of the economy. Imagine entire families migrating seasonally with their flocks, gathering wild fruits and fishing in swift rivers. Their behaviors are marked by strong community solidarity, with assemblies to settle disputes, and women enjoy prominent roles in inheritance and decision-making, often passing property from mother to daughter. In their animistic beliefs, they revere spirits of mountains and forests, with rituals involving dances around bonfires and symbolic sacrifices to ensure successful hunts. They have the tradition of primitive steam baths in heated huts, not only for hygiene, but as spiritual purification. Since 1,200 years before Christ they have remained relatively isolated, but in these 200 years they have adopted iron tools from neighboring Celts, improving their defenses against invaders and allowing more efficient metalworking, without losing their independent essence. Moving to the northwest and central west, we find the Celto-Ligurians, a dynamic fusion of migrating Proto-Celts and indigenous Ligurians, occupying the Mediterranean coasts of present-day France and northern Italy, up to the Alps. They inhabit fortified hilltop villages ideal for defense, where daily life blends wheat and vineyard agriculture with hunting in dense forests. They possess skilled warriors armed with round shields and helmets now blending bronze and iron, protecting trade routes. Their customs include banquets with fermented mead, where oral stories of ancestral heroes are told, reinforcing tribal pride. In their polytheistic beliefs, they worship gods of war and nature, with rituals in sacred rivers involving the immersion of offerings to appease spirits. Curiously, some tribes practiced ritual tattoos as marks of courage, a tradition that would spread. Compared to 1,200 years before Christ, when the Urnfield influence was just beginning, now in 1,000 years before Christ they see a cultural expansion, with cremations in urns becoming more common, reflecting a spiritual view of purification by fire and reincarnation, and iron arriving through trade, making their societies more warlike and connected. Speaking of the Urnfield influence, in the heart of Central Europe, from Germany to Hungary and beyond, the Urnfield culture, the quintessential Proto-Celts, continues to expand. They live in large agricultural communities along fertile rivers, with irrigated fields and herds of horses that allow unprecedented mobility. Imagine villages with wooden and thatched houses, where weavers produce colored wool for ornate clothing, and smiths experiment with the new metal for longer, more durable swords. Their mounted elites lead the amber trade with the north, exchanging it for salt and metals. In their animistic beliefs, they believe in reincarnation and ancestral spirits, with proto-druids performing sacrifices in stone circles to celebrate the seasons. Seasonal festivals include music from primitive harps and dances that unite the community, promoting harmony with nature. A curiosity is their skill in horsemanship, which makes them formidable in battle, spreading fear among neighbors. In the last 200 years, they have consolidated, expanding westward and southward, adopting iron which facilitates the transition to the Iron Age, and intensifying migrations that plant the seeds of the classical Celts, with innovations such as light chariots revolutionizing warfare. Now, time travelers, let's head to Northern Europe, where the harsh climate shapes resilient societies and the amber trade continues to be one of the continent's most lucrative routes. In the far northeast, the Baltic peoples occupy the coasts of the Baltic Sea and the dense forests of present-day Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. These groups, still forming as Protobalts, live in fortified wooden villages along rivers and lakes, where salmon fishing and the hunting of elk and bear are as important as barley and rye farming on sandy soils. Skilled gatherers, they extract precious amber from beaches after storms. Picture entire families walking the cold sands, searching for these tears of the sun that they trade for bronze, and now, iron with distant merchants all the way to the Mediterranean. Their leaders are chosen by merit in assemblies around bonfires. In their beliefs, they are deeply animistic. They revere gods of thunder and forest, offering sacrifices in sacred bogs where they deposit weapons and jewelry to appease water spirits. Many of these deposits have been perfectly preserved by the peat, revealing deliberately bent swords as offerings. They use socket bronze battle axes, and in the last 200 years, have begun adopting iron, making their tools more durable and their defenses stronger against incursions from neighbors. Further east and northeast we find the Protoslavs, spread across vast plains and forests of present-day eastern Poland, Belarus, and western Ukraine. Unlike the Balts, they are in full demographic expansion after the Bronze Age collapse. They live in small unfortified settlements with semi-subterranean houses for protection against harsh winters, cultivating millet, flax, and raising pigs and horses on a large scale. Horse domestication, inherited from earlier times, now allows greater mobility for hunting and herding. They are excellent potters, decorating vessels with corded and incised patterns that silently tell stories of migrations. Their society values the extended family, with sacred hospitality rituals. A visitor always receives bread and salt. They believe in an animistic pantheon with gods of sky and earth, performing steam baths in huts heated by hot stones, precursors of the future Slavic banyas, followed by plunges into icy rivers for purification. They bury their dead with personal goods, suggesting belief in a material afterlife. In these last 200 years, they have expanded significantly south and east, absorbing territories abandoned after the collapse, and have begun experimenting with local iron, marking the beginning of a cultural identity that will flourish centuries later. Moving down to the Balkans and southeastern Europe, we find the Illyrians occupying the Adriatic coast and the mountainous interior of present-day Albania, Croatia, and Bosnia. These fierce warriors evolved from local Bronze Age cultures, now fully in the transition to iron. They live in impressive castri, stone fortresses on hilltops, that dominate fertile valleys where they practice transhumant pastoralism, taking sheep flocks up to the mountains in summer and down in winter. They are known for their early maritime skill, with light boats used for trade and occasional piracy in the Adriatic. Their customs include warrior circle dances, with raised swords and marriages, that still preserve the symbolic abduction of the bride as a rite of passage. They venerate the sun and serpents as symbols of renewal, building megalithic earth-covered tombs called tumuli, where chiefs are buried with incipient iron armor, horned helmets, and Baltic amber jewelry. A curiosity is their tradition of complex tribal tattoos marking status and battle victories. Since the collapse in 1,200 years before Christ, they have benefited from the power vacuum, expanding territories and adopting iron earlier than many neighbors, becoming a feared force in the Adriatic. Nearby, in the southeastern Balkans and northwestern Anatolia, the Thracians consolidate their dominance. Masters of cavalry, they breed the best horses of the time, used both in royal hunts and in battle. They live in open settlements on the Thracian plains, but their kings build monumental tombs filled with worked gold, the famous Thracian treasures. They mine gold, silver, and copper in rich mountains, trading with Phoenicians and Greeks for luxuries. Their nobles practice polygamy and ceremonial hunts as proof of masculinity, while sacred tattoos cover the bodies of warriors and priests, representing the heroic rider god that will inspire later Orphism. They drink wine in ecstatic rituals and play stringed instruments in feasts that last entire nights. In the last 200 years, after the weakening of the Hittites and Mycenaeans, the Thracians have expanded their influence, adopting iron for curved weapons and scale armor, and intensifying contacts with Greek colonists, who begin founding cities on the coast. The Etruscans, established in the central Italian region known as Etruria between the Tiber and Arno rivers, emerge around 1,000 years before Christ as a sophisticated urban civilization, building fortified city-states such as Veii and Tarquinia, where daily life revolves around vineyard and olive agriculture, advanced metalworking, and maritime trade with Greeks and Phoenicians. Their customs include opulent banquets with music and dance, where elites display gold jewelry and colorful garments, while their polytheistic beliefs revere gods of nature and the underworld, with divination rituals through phenomena such as lightning and animal entrails. They profoundly influenced the Romans, transmitting the alphabet, architecture such as arches, and even gladiatorial games, and they bury their dead in elaborate tombs with vivid frescoes, reflecting a strong faith in an afterlife where earthly comfort continues. The Italic peoples, a group of Indo-European peoples who migrated to the Italian peninsula around 1,000 years before Christ, occupy central and southern regions such as Latium, Umbria, and Campania, living in rural settlements and fortified villages where cereal agriculture and cattle breeding form the economic base, complemented by hunting and hill pasturage. Their behaviors are marked by a patriarchal and warrior society, with chiefs elected in tribal assemblies who lead raids and alliances, while customs such as arranged marriages and seasonal wine festivals strengthen community bonds. In their beliefs they adopt deities of fertility and war, performing sacrifices on open altars and using unique scripts for stone inscriptions. Curiously, groups among them such as the Latins will found Rome, adapting foreign alphabets and transmitting traditions that will shape Roman culture, including elements of religion and dress. The Sicanians, considered the aboriginal inhabitants of central and western Sicily around 1,000 years before Christ, reside in mountain villages and isolated valleys of the island, where they practiced subsistence agriculture with grain and fruit cultivation, combined with sheep herding and hunting in dense forests, resisting the influence of arriving Phoenician and Greek colonizers. Their customs involve a simple communal life, with stone and mud dwellings, and rituals that celebrate nature through dances and offerings in sacred caves. They believe in animistic spirits of sun, moon, and fertile elements, likely with earth goddesses as a focus, and bury their dead in megalithic tombs. They value hospitality, with Greek legends describing them as peaceful yet resilient against invasions. The Proto-Germanics, ancestors of the Germanic peoples, inhabit around 1,000 years before Christ the forests and plains of northern Europe, from Scandinavia to central Germany and the Low Countries, living in patriarchal clans dispersed in wooden and thatched farmsteads, where hunting, fishing, and barley and rye cultivation sustain communities that migrate seasonally in search of fertile land. Their behaviors are fierce and loyal, with warriors who value bravery in battle, using bronze axes and spears, and electing kings in assemblies of free men. In their pagan beliefs they revere gods such as the thunder god and nature spirits, performing sacrifices in sacred groves to ensure victory and good harvests. Curiously, their society emphasizes ancestral lineage and hospitality, with women holding status, and their oral culture transmits myths that link war to religion, influencing future Nordic traditions. The Cimmerians, Eastern Iranian origin equestrian nomads around 1,000 years before Christ, roam the Pontic Caspian steppes north of the Black Sea, in present-day Ukraine and southern Russia, migrating in mounted hordes that raid neighboring civilizations such as the Assyrians and Urartians, living off plunder, hunting, and horse breeding in temporary felt tent camps. Their behaviors are aggressive and mobile, with skilled horse archers buried with weapons and sacrificed horses to accompany them in the afterlife. They believe in protective gods and ancestral spirits, likely with shamanic elements, and rituals involving offerings to war deities. They were among the first to domesticate horses for battle, shocking empires with their ferocity, and Greek legends portray them as mythical invaders, eventually displaced by the Scythians, leaving a legacy of terror and mobility that influenced later nomadic peoples. The Lusatian culture, Lausitz, flourishing around 1,000 years before Christ in present-day Poland, parts of the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and eastern Germany, consisted of agricultural communities along rivers such as the Oder and Vistula, living in fortified villages with wooden houses, where they cultivated cereals, wove wool, and practiced bronze metallurgy for tools and weapons. Their patriarchal customs included clans that hunted, fished, and traded amber with the south, while community behaviors involved assemblies for decisions and seasonal festivals. In their animistic beliefs they cremated the dead in urns placed in cemeteries, symbolizing purification and belief in reincarnation, or ancestral spirits. Considered a vector for Balto-Slavic expansions, their expansive society resisted Scythian invasions, leaving fortresses like Biskupin as testimony to innovations in irrigated agriculture and decorated pottery, marking the transition toward ancient Slavic identities. And so we reach the end of our journey through 1,000 years before Christ. A Europe in full transition, where iron begins to spread, ancient cultures reinvent themselves, and new trade routes redraw the continent. Thank you for traveling with us through these 200 years of transformation. Leave your like, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in the history of Europe. See you in the next episode.